Hello and welcome to the video. So today we're going to do something a bit different than normal because I'm going to try and put together this pile of parts. But I also think it's been a bit damaged en route to me as well because a couple of parts look as though they've been fit before and then broken off. So we're going to try and get this back together and see how far we can get with it. So the chassis is already looking quite well constructed and it has the motor and the wheels and the valve gear already fitted. So I think we should probably give this a go by putting some power to it and make sure that everything runs before we do anything else. So I've just got the model held upside down and I've got some power on these cables, so I'm just going to give it a little try by prodding at the wheels. Okay, nothing happens there, but I do see that there's a wire hanging down here which goes to the tender, I guess, so I'm just going to apply power onto that and then onto the wheels. So this looks as though it picks up power from the tender through this wire here and then picks up from the track only on one side of this wheel set on the locomotive, which is the side furthest away from the camera. So I'm just going to mark that on the bottom of the locomotive here with a pen. I've just used a Sharpie to add a little arrow, you can see it there on the bottom plate, just pointing to this side of the locomotive. There's also a 3 written on here, that wasn't me. Anyway, so this little arrow will keep us straight when we put the rest of it together. So in this pile of stuff there is some things that are obviously the tender, which includes this part here and this weight which obviously fits inside it. And we can also see these little trucks here as well, those are part of the tender. So I'm going to put the tender aside for one moment and we'll focus on the locomotive. And we've got this collection of screws and little bits and pieces here. Now I'm not exactly sure where these go. I think this is a drawbar between the locomotive and the tender. But aside from that, I'm not quite sure what these other parts are for or where they go. So we'll just give it a go and see what happens. We've also got this front truck as well in this little bag with a screw, so that's pretty obvious where that goes. And we also have this bag which looks like couplings and a few other bits and pieces, another screw and obviously a headlight there. It's got a little jewel in it as well, which is quite neat. So this boiler part is made of metal, it's quite heavy as well. And you can see that it has already been painted. It's got the silver here at this end and black here and this gold bell put on as well. You can also see it's got some really fine handrails being put on. So whoever started this model has really done some really nice modelling work already. I'm not quite sure why they just gave up on it. I'm hoping there's nothing major that we're going to find as we go along, but it would seem logical that maybe this part goes on first onto the chassis, so I'll give that a try to begin with. So here at the front we've got a couple of holes here, and obviously these rods from the boiler fit into those holes. You can see that this has been painted and some of the paint's come off there. So I need to get those lined up in there, and I think that's how the boiler goes on. It looks as though it's got an awful lot of space here, like maybe it should have something else in there, but I can't see anything obvious. So there's obviously a screw needed through here to hold the two parts together. And you can also see here there's another screw hole which is for the pony truck at the front. I'm thinking it might be this screw here. So at this point back I'm thinking maybe this cable slots into one of these little channels here and goes to the tender. I can't see any other way of getting it back through to the tender. And we have this cab part as well which fits on somewhere. I think this must go like this maybe? Yeah, got it the wrong way around. It goes this way around. Okay, so I've made a mistake already because there's a place for a screw to go in here and also in the top of the boiler, but because we've put the boiler together we can't get at the screw, so I'm going to have to take the boiler apart. So that's not a good start so far. So there's some holes there in the end of the cab which must marry up with these handrails. But I can see that there's 4 holes there, but we've only got 2 handrails, so I'm not quite sure what the other 2 holes are for. When I put this here, it looks as though the handrails... Oh dear, another piece that's fallen off. Where did that come from? Ah, it came from here. No! So we seem to have broken this part here as well, so that's a bit of a shame. Let me see if I can get this together. Time for some poly cement. So the good news here is that you can't actually see where it broke off when you put this back together, so that's great, and I think we've got away. But I'm beginning to see why the last person gave up on this model, because it's really fiddly already. At least we've got it onto the boiler and it's looking not too bad. So let's put this back on the chassis. Now before we put these two pieces back together, I've just realised that this cable has the option to go on either the left or the right. It has a trough on each side, so it's not very clear whether it should be on one side or the other. But it obviously goes back to the tender. So I'm just going to have a look at this, which is the chassis of the tender. And here it says inside, I'm not quite sure what that says there. But you can see here that it has a hole here, and I think that's where this attaches onto. You can see it's on this side as I put it here, so the cable needs to go down this side of the cab. Okay, we're going to put the tender together now, and we have this part which is the chassis of the tender. We saw that earlier on. It's got one hole here, and that corresponds to a little stud here on the underside of the tender part. So these two pieces fit together like this. And then we have this screw left, which is long enough to go through here. Now we have this hole here at the back for a coupling. Then we have this for the drawbar, and obviously these two for the bogies, which we're going to put on just now. Now when we had a look at the locomotive, we saw which side it picked up from. So having a look at these bogies, you can see this side picks up and this side is insulated. You can see the little black insulation there just by the axle. There isn't one on this side. So this side is the live side. And on the bottom of the locomotive, we did put a little arrow to say this way. So with the tender sitting here, we need to pick up from the side furthest away from the camera. So these bogies need to go in this way round. Before putting the second bogie on, I just want to add in the coupling onto here, because I think once we put the bogie on here, it's going to be quite difficult to do that. So these parts here seem to be the coupling, and it's a very small one, just a little hook. Okay, so I don't know if you saw what I did there, but I've managed to assemble this coupling, and it's going to fit in here. Hopefully this screw is going to hold the whole thing together. That was a little bit fiddly, but we've managed to get that on the back of the tender now, so that's great. And then we need to put this bogie back on as well. And just check that you're getting pick up from the same side as the front one. You can see that this side is where we're picking up from, and the side closest to the camera is the insulated side. And I now realise this says INS, meaning insulated side. Great, I figured it out. Okay, so we need to put on this drawbar as well. We have two screws here which look the same. I'm going to add this onto here. And then we've got this screw which is for the power connector. So we've got this tender back together, and what I can see as well when we were doing that is that there is a little footstep, and we have similar little footsteps in a little bag of bits. But there only seems to be two of them, so it looks like we're going to be minus a footstep. So I'm going to attach them on, and for that I'm going to use some super glue. That absolutely sucked trying to get those back onto that tender, but I think we're there now. We've only got three, and it appears to be that one of the ones that had fallen off is on the back and the other one was on the front. So it's not great, but it'll do the job, and we'll put some paint on that later to hide the super glue marks there as well. So I'm going to put this aside to let the glue dry for now. Back to the steam locomotive, and I can see here on the paint that something was attached here before and it's broken off. And it's the same on the other side as well. And I can see that it's these parts here. So I'm thinking that this points forward and attaches onto the side of the locomotive here. So again, I'm going to use a little bit of super glue to put those back on. So another part we have to add on is the headlight, and that fits on the front of this locomotive. So I'm just going to use some super glue for this as well. So I think that's the last of the glue, hopefully, fingers crossed. And the next bit is to put on this pony truck, and it has a screw just to fit onto the front of the locomotive. So it's going to go into this area here. I think we're getting on pretty well now, but we do have this collection of little broken bits and pieces down here. This screw here is for the drawbar, so I know we have to keep that. And it's pretty obvious that this is all broken coupling, which I guess went on the front of this locomotive. So this part looks as though it's broken off completely, so I think that's just for the bin. But I think these parts here we could use if we ever want to fit a coupling onto the front of this locomotive. I'm not going to do that just now because I don't have one of these couplings, but I'm just going to keep these for later and put them in the box. So I did notice as we were working on this model that some of the black paint has worn off this model, so I'm just going to touch it up. I've got some matte black paint here from Vallejo, and I'm just going to use that. Nothing special, just matte black. Just a little bit of touch up there of the black, but I did see that we still have some problems like this little smudge here on the side of the cab and also up here, and we've got a little bit in there as well. And so this would be something I'd be looking to repaint, but I'm not quite sure what that colour is. I don't think I've got this colour in my paint box, so I'm just going to leave it for now. So it's a bit of a mystery. I thought this was HOe scale and worked on N-gauge track, but when I tried it on some Pico Flexi track, it just didn't fit onto it. It's almost like it's maybe TT scale or something like that, so I'm a bit confused about what's going on there. But what I'm going to do to test this locomotive is just use a couple of wires on it and see if it works. Okay, here goes. So this pile of parts, which turned out to be a steam locomotive after all, has gone together quite nicely, and it does look like quite a cool looking steam locomotive. Obviously when you buy an unfinished project there's always going to be some oddities here and there, and also if you get something that doesn't have any instructions it's always going to be a bit tricky at times. This particular model is quite a nice thing because it's got a lot of character to it. There's a number of things that I really like about this, including the headlight with this little jewel, and also the running gear, and the wheels are quite cool and they work very well. The motor as well seems to be very strong, and with the pickup from the tender it seems to want to run very well. There's also some really cool things like the coal in the tender is one of the best I've seen. It really looks very realistic and I'm quite impressed with that. And there's a lot of detail on this model as we've seen because it's been quite fiddly to get back together. However, I'm a bit at a loss to understand what track this goes on. It's not N-gauge, so it may be TT, I'm not quite sure. I also don't know what colour the cab should be, whether this is actually real or whether it's just somebody else's interpretation of it. And we also have a couple of holes here and there, like on the cab front, and also on the boiler front as well, and there's no other additional parts to go in there, and I'm not even sure what I'm meant to custom make to go in there either, because I don't know what this locomotive is. So I think I've taken this model as far as I can, so I've decided to part ways with it and just put it on eBay and allow somebody else to have some pleasure or maybe annoyance with it. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed what I did here today. Let me know in the comments below if you've got this locomotive or you've had similar frustrating times with the locomotives in your collection. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps this channel, and you can subscribe for more videos about model railways. But that's it for today. See you next time.